Chapter 8, The Mermaid's Lagoon. If you shut your eyes and are a lucky one, you may see at times a shapeless pool of lovely pale colors suspended in the darkness. Then, if you squeeze your eyes tighter, the pool becomes to take shape and the colors become so vivid that with another squeeze they must go on fire. But just before they go on fire, you see the lagoon. This is the nearest you ever get to it on the mainland, just one heavenly moment. If there could be 2 moments, you might see the surf and hear the mermaid singing. The children often spent long summer days on this lagoon, swimming or floating, most of the time, playing the mermaid games in the water, and so forth. You must not think from this that the mermaids were on friendly terms with them. On the contrary, it was among Wendy's lasting regrets that all the time she was on the island, she never had a civil word from one of them. When she stole softly to the edge of the lagoon, she might see them by the score, especially on Marooner's Rock, where they loved to bask, combing out their hair in a lazy way that quite irritated her. Or she might even swim, on tiptoe as it were, to within a yard of them, but then they saw her and dived, probably splashing her with their tails, not by accident, but intentionally. They treated all of the boys in the same way, except of course Peter, who chatted with them on the Marooner's Rock by the hour, and sat on their tails when they got cheeky. He gave Wendy one of their combs. The most haunting time at which to see them is the turn of the moon, when they utter strange wailing cries. But the lagoon is dangerous for mortals then, and until the evening, of which we have now to tell, Wendy had never seen the lagoon by moonlight, less from fear, for of course Peter would have accompanied her, than because she had strict rules about everyone being in bed by 7. She was often at the lagoon, however, on sunny days after rain, when the mermaids come up in extraordinary numbers to play with their bubbles. The bubbles of many colors made in the rainbow, where they treat as balls, hitting them gaily from one another with their tails, and trying to keep them in the rainbow till they burst. The goals are at each end of the rainbow, and the keepers are only allowed to use their hands. Sometimes a dozen of these games will be going on in the lagoon at a time, and it is quite a pretty sight. But the moment the children tried to join in, they had to play by themselves, for the mermaids immediately disappeared. Nevertheless, we have proof that they secretly watched the interlopers, and were not above taking an idea from them, for John introduced a new way of hitting the bubble, with the head instead of his hand, and the mermaids adopted it. This is the one mark that John has left on the Neverland. It must have also been rather pretty to see the children resting on a rock for half an hour after their midday meal. Wendy insisted on their doing this, as it had been a real rest, even though the meal was make-believe. So they lay there in the sun, and their bodies glistened in it, while she sat beside them and looked important. It was on such a day that they were all on Marooner's Rock. The rock was not much larger than their great bed, but of course they all knew how not to take up much room, and they were dozing, or at least lying with their eyes shut and pinching occasionally when they thought Wendy was not looking. She was very busy stitching. While she stitched, a change came to the lagoon. Little shivers ran over it. The sun went away, and the shadow stole across the water, turning it cold. Wendy could no longer see the thread to her needle, and when she looked up, the lagoon, that had always been such a laughing place, seemed formidable and unfriendly. It was not she knew that night had come, but something as dark as night had come. No worse than that, it had not come, but it had sent a shiver down through the sea to say that it was coming. What was it? There was a crowd upon her. All the stories she had been told of the Marooner's Rock, so called because evil captains put sailors on it and then left them there to drown. They drown when the tide rises, for then it is submerged. Of course, she should have roused the children at once, but not merely because of the unknown that was stalking toward them, but because it was no longer good for them to sleep on a rock grown chilly. But she was a young mother, and she did not know this. She thought you simply must stick to your role about half an hour after the midday meal. So though fear was upon her, and she longed to hear more voices, she would not wake them, even when she had heard the sound of the muffled oars. Though her heart was in her mouth, she did not wake them. She stood over them to let them have their sleep out. Was it brave of Wendy? It was well for those boys that there was one among them who could sniff danger even in his sleep. Peter sprang awake at once like a dog, and with a warning cry, roused the others. He stood motionless, one hand to his ear. "Pirates," he cried. The others came closer. A strange smile was playing on his face, and Wendy saw it and shuddered. While that smile was on his face, no one dared to address him. All they could do was stand ready to obey. The order came sharp and incisive. "Dive." There was a gleam of legs, and instantly the lagoon seemed deserted. Marooner's Rock stood alone in the forbidding waters, as if it were itself marooned. The boat drew near. It was a pirate dinghy with 3 figures in her. Shmee, Starkey, and the third a captive, no other than Tiger Lily. Her hands and ankles were tied, and she knew it was to be her fate. She was to be left on the rock to perish. An end to one of her race more terrible than by fire or torture, for it is not written in the book that there is a path through water to the happy hunting ground. Yet her face was impassive. She was the daughter of the chief. She must die as a chief's daughter. It is enough. They had caught her boarding the pirate ship with a knife in her mouth. No watch was kept on the ship, it being Hook's boast that the wind of his name guarded the ship for a mile around. Now her fate would help to guard it also. One more whale would go the round in that wind by night. In the gloom that they brought with them, the two pirates did not see the rock till they crashed into it. "Luff, you lubber," cried an Irish voice that was Shmee's. "Here's the rock, now that. What do we have to do is hoist the redskin onto it and leave her here to drown." It was the work of one brutal moment to land the beautiful girl on the rock. She was too proud to offer a vain resistance. Quite near the rock, but out of sight, two heads were bobbing up and down, Peter's and Wendy's. Wendy was crying, for it was the first tragedy she had seen. Peter had seen many tragedies, but he had forgotten them all. He was less sorry than for Wendy, for Tiger Lily. It was 2 against 1, and that angered him, and he meant to save her. An easy way would have been to wait until the pirates had gone, but he was never one to choose the easy way. There was almost nothing he could do about it, and he now imitated the voice of Hook. "Ahoy there, you lubbers," he called. It was a marvelous imitation. "The captain," said the pirates, staring at each other in surprise. "He must be swimming out to us," Starkey said, when they had looked for him in vain. "We are putting the redskin on the rock," Shmee called out. "Set her free," came the astonishing voice. "Free?" "Yes, cut her bonds and let her go." "But, Captain—" "At once, d'ye hear?" cried Peter, "or I'll plunge my hook into you." "This is odd," Shmee gasped. "Better do what the captain orders," said Starsky nervously. "Aye, aye," Shmee said, and he cut Tiger Lily's cords at once. Like an eel, she slid between Starky's legs into the water. Of course, Wendy was very elated over Peter's cleverness, but she knew that he would be elated also, and very likely crow and thus betray himself. So at once her hand went to cover his mouth, but it was stayed even in the act, for "Boat ahoy!" rang over the lagoon in Hook's voice, and this time it was not Peter who had spoken. Peter may have been about to crow, but his face puckered in a whistle of surprise instead. "Boat ahoy!" came the voice again. Now Wendy understood. The real Hook was also in the water. He was swimming to the boat, and as his men showed to light to guide him, he soon reached them. In the light of the lantern, Wendy saw his hook grip the boat's side. She saw his evil, swarthy face as he rose dripping from the water, and quaking. She would have liked to swim away, but Peter would not budge. He was tingling with life and also top-heavy with conceit. "Am I not a wonder? Oh, I am a wonder," he whispered to her. Though she thought so also, she was really glad for the sake of his reputation that no one had heard him except for herself. He signed to her to listen. The two pirates were very curious to know what had brought their captain to him, but he sat with his head on his hook in the position of a profound melancholy. "Captain, is all well?" they asked timidly, but he answered with a hollow moan. "He sighs," said Shmee. "He sighs again," said Starkey. "And yet a third time he sighs," said Shmee. Then at last he spoke passionately. "The game's up," he cried. "Those boys have found a mother." Frightened though she was, Wendy swelled with pride. "Oh, evil day," cried Starkey. "What's a mother?" asked the ignorant Shmee. Wendy was so shocked that she exclaimed, "He doesn't know." And always after that she felt that if she could have a pet pirate, Shmee would be her one. Peter pulled her beneath the water, for Hook had started up crying. "What was that?" "I heard nothing," said Starkey, raising the lantern over the waters. As the pirates looked, they saw a strange sight. It was the nest I have told you of, floating on the lagoon, and the